My name is Maya Chen. I'm 36 years old, and 3 weeks ago, my own mother staged a fake intervention to exile me from the family. I'm not exaggerating. I'm not being dramatic. She literally printed handouts. It was Thanksgiving at our family's lakeside house in Seattle, the same house I'd been paying the mortgage on for 7 years. I walked through the front door carrying 2 pies and a bottle of wine, expecting the usual chaos of cousins and football and my aunt's burned green bean casserole. Instead, I found chairs arranged in a circle in the living room. My mother stood at the center like she was hosting a TED Talk on betrayal. "Maya, sit down," she said. Her voice had that practiced softness she uses when she wants to seem reasonable. "We need to talk as a family." I looked around. My father sat rigid in the corner, jaw tight, eyes fixed on the floor. My younger brother Daniel hunched forward, elbows on his knees, clearly uncomfortable. My aunt and uncle occupied the love seat. 2 cousins I barely spoke to filled the remaining chairs. The pies suddenly felt ridiculous in my hands. "What is this?" I asked. My mother gestured to the empty seat. "This is an intervention. We've all agreed that your behavior has become toxic, and we can't allow it to continue affecting this family." The word toxic landed like a slap. I set the pies on the side table, the ceramic dish clinking against the wood. My fingers were steady, but my chest had gone cold. "An intervention," I repeated slowly. "For what exactly?" My mother lifted a stack of papers from the coffee table. Handouts. She'd actually made handouts. "For your controlling behavior," she said, passing sheets around the room. "Your constant need to hold things over our heads. The way you make everyone feel guilty for needing help. We've discussed it privately, and we've reached a consensus." I watched my relatives accept the papers like obedient students. My aunt nodded along. My uncle wouldn't meet my eyes. "A consensus?" I echoed. "Yes." My mother's chin lifted. "We're asking you to step back from family involvement. No more unsolicited opinions. No more bringing up money. No more acting like you're the only one keeping this family together." Daniel shifted in his seat. "Mom, maybe we should—" "Daniel." Her voice sharpened. "We discussed this." He went quiet. I stood in the center of that circle, surrounded by people who'd benefited from my sacrifice for over a decade, watching them nod along to a script my mother had written. Here's what they didn't know. I'd suspected something was coming. The whispered phone calls that stopped when I entered rooms. The group chat I'd mysteriously been removed from 2 weeks prior. The way my mother had specifically insisted I arrive 30 minutes after everyone else. So I came prepared. "Can I say something?" I asked, keeping my voice level. My mother spread her hands magnanimously. "Of course. This is a dialogue." "It's really not," I said, "but I appreciate the performance." Her eyes narrowed slightly. I walked to the front door where I'd left my bag, pulled out a leather portfolio, and returned to the circle. The portfolio was thick, heavy. I'd spent 2 weeks assembling it. "Before you finalize this consensus," I said, "I think everyone should understand exactly what they're voting on." My mother's composure flickered. "We're not voting. We've already decided." "Have you?" I unzipped the portfolio. "Because I'm curious whether everyone here knows the full picture, or just the version you told them." I pulled out the first document and held it up. "This is a spreadsheet," I explained. 12 years of financial support I've provided to this family. Every wire transfer, every paid bill, every emergency loan. Total amount $243,000. The room went silent. My mother's face tightened. "This is exactly what we're talking about. You're making everything about money." "No," I said calmly. "You made it about worthiness, about who deserves to be in this family. I'm simply providing context." I handed copies around the room, just as she had with her handouts. My aunt's eyes widened as she scanned the numbers. My uncle's face drained of color when he found his name. "Page 1 is just the summary," I continued. "The details start on page 2. Daniel took his copy with trembling hands. He'd known I helped, but even he hadn't seen the complete picture. My mother snatched a copy and flipped it open. Her expression shifted from confident to uncertain in the span of 3 seconds. "Where did you get this?" she demanded. "From my records," I replied. "I'm an attorney, Mom. Documentation is what I do." She stared at the page like it might bite her. "You've been tracking everything," she said slowly, "like we're your clients." "No, like you're people who repeatedly promised to pay me back and never did. There's a difference." My father finally spoke, his voice rough. "Maya, this feels like an attack." I turned to him. "Dad, you organized an intervention to call me toxic. You arranged chairs in a circle to tell me I'm not welcome. What exactly did you expect me to bring? Gratitude?" He looked away. My mother recovered quickly, straightening her spine. "Financial contributions don't excuse emotional abuse," she declared. "Money doesn't give you the right to control everyone." "I agree completely," I said. "So let's talk about who's really been controlling whom." I flipped to the next section of the portfolio, because I have receipts, and I do mean that literally. The second section of my portfolio was labeled the boutique hotel, my mother's pride and joy, her retirement dream, the business she'd started 8 years ago with money she didn't have, money I provided. "Let's start here," I said, pulling out a scanned document. "This is the original loan agreement for the Westlake Boutique Hotel. $65,000 from me to you, dated March 2016. Your signature is at the bottom." My mother's jaw tightened. That was a family investment. "It was a loan," I corrected, "with agreed-upon repayment terms that you never honored. The document specifies monthly payments of $800 starting 6 months after opening. You made exactly 4 payments before telling me the hotel needed that money more than I did." I let that settle. "Page 12 shows my co-signature on the commercial property loan," I continued. "The bank required it because your credit score was insufficient. I put my financial reputation on the line so you could secure that building." My uncle muttered something under his breath. My aunt elbowed him silent. "Page 15. I flipped ahead. "Text messages from June 2019 when the hotel flooded. You asked me to cover emergency repairs because insurance was taking too long. $14,000. You said you'd repay me within the year." "I intended to," my mother interjected. "Intent and action are different things." I pulled out another page. "This is a voicemail transcript from September 2021, 2:14 in the morning. You were crying because a guest had filed a lawsuit and you couldn't afford legal representation." I looked at her. "I handled that case personally. Pro bono. 70 hours of legal work that would have cost you at least $20,000 on the open market. The case was dismissed in your favor." "We were grateful," my father said weakly. "Were you?" I turned to him. "Because 6 months later you told me I was too involved in the hotel and needed to step back from management decisions. You said I was overstepping." He didn't respond. "That's the pattern," I continued. "Crisis happens, Maya helps, crisis resolves, Maya gets told she's too controlling. Repeat for 12 years. Daniel finally spoke. "Maya, I didn't know about most of this." "I know you didn't." My voice softened slightly, because every time I tried to discuss it, I was told I was making things uncomfortable, that family doesn't keep score. "Family shouldn't keep score," my mother snapped. "Then why are you holding one right now?" I gestured to her handout still scattered around the room. "You literally printed a list of my alleged offenses. That's a scorecard, Mom. You just didn't expect me to bring mine." She went quiet. I pulled out the next section labeled Medical and Housing Support. "This covers the mortgage payments on this house," I explained. 7 years of supplemental payments when Dad's disability income wasn't enough. Total, $84,000. My father's face crumpled. "And this," I held up another stack, "medical expenses, Mom's knee surgery in 2020, Dad's cardiac monitoring equipment, the home modifications after his stroke, insurance gaps I covered without being asked for repayment." "We never asked you to do that," my mother said, but her voice had lost its edge. "No, you didn't ask. You assumed. You assumed I'd handle it because I always had. And then you resented me for having the information that came from handling it." My aunt stood abruptly. "I don't think I should be here for this." "Sit down, Linda." My mother's command was sharp. "She's trying to humiliate us. Don't let her win." I laughed. It was involuntary, and it startled everyone. "Win?" I repeated. "Mom, what exactly do you think I'm winning? I've spent 12 years pouring money and time into this family. I've sacrificed vacations, relationships, my own financial security, and you just told me I'm toxic for having the audacity to remember." "You remember because you want leverage," she accused. "I remember because no one else would." The silence stretched. Daniel stared at his copy of the spreadsheet, flipping slowly through the pages. His name appeared 3 times. Once for the apartment deposit I'd covered when he'd moved to Portland, once for the car repair after his accident, once for the emergency loan when his startup had almost collapsed. "I thought those were gifts," he said quietly. "They were," I admitted. "I never expected repayment from you, but I also never expected to be sitting here while Mom explains why I don't belong anymore." He looked at me with something approaching shame. My mother's composure was cracking. I could see it in the way she gripped her handouts, the paper wrinkling under her fingers. "This doesn't change anything," she insisted. "Money isn't love, Maya. You can't buy your way into forgiveness for how you've treated us." "How I've treated you." I let the words hang. "Tell me specifically, not feelings, not impressions, specific actions." She faltered. "Because I can tell you specific actions," I pressed. "I can tell you about every missed birthday dinner because you needed emergency accounting help, every vacation I canceled, every relationship that ended because my partners felt like they'd never be priority over your crises." My voice cracked slightly, and I hated it. "You want to call me toxic? Fine. Show me the evidence, because I've shown you mine." Have you ever been accused of keeping score by people who only noticed because the score wasn't in their favor? My mother recovered enough to launch a counterattack. "You've always thought you were better than us," she said, voice rising. "Your fancy law degree, your downtown apartment, looking down on our little hotel like it's beneath you." "I helped build that hotel," I replied evenly. "With my money, with my legal expertise. With weekends I spent reviewing contracts and negotiating with vendors. You don't get to rewrite that history just because it's inconvenient." "See?" She turned to the room triumphantly. "This is exactly what I mean. She throws her contributions in our faces constantly." "Name one time before today that I brought up the money unprompted." She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "It's always there," she finally said. "Even when you don't say it, we can feel it. So I'm being punished for your guilt? You're being asked to change your attitude." "No." I shook my head slowly. "I'm being asked to keep giving without acknowledgement, to keep sacrificing without boundaries, to keep showing up while you treat me like a necessary inconvenience rather than a daughter." My father rubbed his face. "Maya, please, can we just get through one holiday without drama?" Something in me snapped quietly. Not explosively, just a clean break. "You're right, Dad. Let's end the drama." I reached into the portfolio and pulled out the final section, the one I'd hoped I wouldn't need. "This is a letter from my attorney," I announced, "addressed to First Pacific Bank regarding the commercial loan on the Westlake Boutique Hotel." My mother's face went white. "As of December 1st, I'm formally withdrawing as co-signer on that loan. The bank will be notified that they can no longer count on my credit or assets as collateral." "You can't do that," she breathed. "I can, and I am." I flipped to the next document. "Additionally, this is an accounting of the converted equity." "The what? You never read the loan agreement, did you?" I met her eyes. "When you stopped making payments 3 years ago, the terms specified that unpaid amounts would convert to equity stake in the business. According to my calculations, confirmed by an independent auditor, I currently own 42% of the Westlake Boutique Hotel." The room erupted. My mother screamed something incoherent. My father stood up so fast his chair tipped backward. My aunt and uncle exchanged panicked glances. Daniel looked like he might be sick. "This is fraud," my mother snarled. "You forged these documents." "Every document is notarized and dated," I said calmly. "Your signatures are authentic. The conversion clause was on page 4 of the original agreement. You initialed it." "I never agreed to give you my hotel." "You agreed to pay me back. When you didn't, the contract protected me. That's not fraud, Mom. That's consequences." She lunged toward me and my father caught her arm. "Victoria, stop," he said, the first useful thing he'd done all evening. She was shaking. With rage or fear, I couldn't tell. Maybe both. "What do you want?" she demanded. "Money? Fine. We'll get you your money." "With what?" I asked. "Your savings that don't exist? The equity you've already borrowed against? The retirement fund you drained 2 years ago?" She had no answer. "I don't want your money," I said quietly. "I wanted to be your daughter, but that position apparently required a vote, and I lost." I gathered the portfolio and zipped it closed. "Here's what happens next. On Monday, the bank gets notified about the co-signature withdrawal. They'll reassess the loan based on the remaining guarantor, which is you, Mom, with your credit score of 580. They'll likely demand renegotiation or additional collateral. If you can't provide it, they may call the loan entirely." "You'll destroy us," she whispered. "No, I'm stepping out of the way. Whatever happens next is between you and the choices you've made." I slung my bag over my shoulder. "Maya, wait." Daniel stood up. "There has to be another way. Can't you just postpone? Give them time to figure something out?" I looked at my little brother, the only one who'd seemed genuinely uncomfortable with this ambush. "I gave them 12 years, I said gently. "I postponed my own life to figure out their problems. And tonight they told me I was toxic for having the audacity to exist while remembering." I touched his shoulder briefly. "This isn't about you, Daniel. Call me when you're ready. But I'm done performing for people who resent me for caring." I walked to the door. "You're going to regret this," my mother called after me. "When you're alone, when you need family, you'll come crawling back." I paused with my hand on the knob. "Maybe," I admitted, "but I'd rather be alone and at peace than surrounded by people who voted me out and expected me to keep paying for the privilege." I opened the door. The November air hit my face, sharp and clean. Behind me, the chaos continued. My mother's accusations, my father's attempts to calm her, relatives scrambling to understand what had just happened. I walked to my car without looking back. My hands shook as I gripped the steering wheel. Tears blurred the road for the first 3 miles. But underneath the pain, underneath the grief, there was something else. Relief. For the first time in 12 years, my phone wasn't buzzing with their emergencies. My calendar wasn't blocked for their crises. My future wasn't mortgaged to their dreams. I was alone, and I was free. 8 months later, I sat on the balcony of my new apartment in Portland, watching the sun set over the Willamette River. The move had been impulsive at first. 2 months after Thanksgiving, I'd handed in my resignation at the firm where I'd worked for 9 years, packed my essential belongings, and driven south without a clear plan. People thought I was having a breakdown. Maybe I was, but it was the productive kind. The phone calls from Seattle started immediately after Thanksgiving and continued for weeks. My mother cycled through rage, denial, bargaining, and more rage. My father left voicemails asking me to be reasonable. Relatives I hadn't heard from in years suddenly reached out, always with the same message. Family doesn't do this to each other. They were right. Family doesn't hold interventions to exile their own. Family doesn't demand sacrifice while calling it toxic when acknowledged. Family doesn't vote. I blocked most of the numbers by January. The bank, as predicted, reassessed the hotel loan. My mother couldn't provide additional collateral or a qualified co-signer. They renegotiated the terms. Higher interest rate, shorter repayment window, mandatory quarterly reviews. The hotel limped along for 4 months before the inevitable happened. Daniel texted me in June. She sold it. Couldn't make the new payments work. Buyers are a restaurant group from California. They're keeping the building but gutting everything inside. I stared at that message for a long time. I won't pretend I felt nothing. That hotel had been part of my life too. My weekends spent reviewing vendor contracts, my expertise protecting it from lawsuits, my money keeping it afloat during lean seasons. Watching it pass to strangers should have felt like a personal failure. Instead, it felt like the closing of a chapter I'd been ready to end for years. "What about Mom and Dad?" I texted back. "They sold the lake house too, moving to a condo near Aunt Linda. Mom's not speaking to anyone who still talks to you." I absorbed that information without the guilt I expected. "And you?" I asked. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. "I'm starting therapy. My therapist says I've been the good child by default because you were always the responsible one. I'm figuring out what I actually want instead of just staying neutral." I smiled at my phone. "That sounds healthy. I'm proud of you." His response came quickly. "Can I visit? This summer, maybe? I want to understand your side. Really understand it." That was how Daniel ended up on my Portland balcony 2 months later, drinking iced coffee while I told him everything. Not just the money, but the years of dismissal, the way our mother had weaponized my competence, demanding my help while resenting my capability, the slow erosion of expecting nothing in return while receiving exactly that. "I never saw it," he admitted. "I thought you were just intense, controlling. The way Mom always said." "I know. But listening to you now and looking at those documents and watching what happened after you left," he shook his head. "She rewrote everything, made herself the victim, made you the villain, and I believed her because it was easier." "It usually is." He was quiet for a moment. "Do you think you'll ever talk to them again?" I considered the question seriously. 8 months of space had given me clarity I'd never had while trapped in the cycle. "I don't know," I finally said. "I've learned that forgiveness and reconciliation aren't the same thing. I can forgive them for being flawed, for being scared, for handling their inadequacies by blaming me. But reconciliation requires them to change, and I can't control that. I can only control whether I put myself back in a position to be hurt." Daniel nodded slowly. "That's fair." "The door isn't locked," I added, "but they'd have to walk through it honestly. No performances, no handouts explaining my toxicity, just accountability." "I don't know if Mom's capable of that." "Neither do I, and that's okay. I'm building a life that doesn't depend on her answer." And I was. The consulting firm I'd started, Chen Legal Strategies, specializing in small business contracts and family financial disputes, had grown faster than I expected. Word spread that I understood both the legal and emotional complexity of family-entangled businesses. Clients found me through referrals, through the article I'd written about protecting yourself from family financial abuse, through the podcast episode where I'd told a sanitized version of my story. I wasn't rich, but I was stable. And more importantly, I was healthy in a way I hadn't been for years. I'd started painting again, something I'd abandoned in law school when practical became the only acceptable adjective. I'd made friends who knew nothing about my family, who liked me for my terrible puns and my obsession with documentary films. I'd gone on dates that didn't end with me checking my phone for family emergencies. I'd learned what peace felt like. Daniel stayed for 3 days. When he left, we hugged at the airport for longer than we ever had as children. "I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner," he murmured. "You're seeing it now. That's what matters." As I drove home, I thought about the Thanksgiving that had shattered everything. The chairs arranged in a circle, the handouts, the word toxic lobbed like a grenade at someone who'd only ever tried to help. I thought about the girl I'd been at 24, rushing to cover my mother's first hotel crisis without hesitation. The woman I'd been at 30, exhausted but still answering midnight calls. The person I'd become at 36, sitting in that circle and finally refusing to accept the unacceptable. They'd voted me out of the family, and in doing so, they'd given me the permission I'd never been able to give myself. Permission to leave. Here's my question for you. Have you ever been punished for remembering what others preferred to forget? Have you ever been called the problem because you held on to proof of the problems they created? Tell me your story. Because somewhere out there, another Maya is sitting in a circle, being handed documents that blame her for her own sacrifice. She needs to know she's not alone, and neither are you. Before you scroll away, let me say one more thing. When I first decided to share this story, I wasn't sure anyone would care. It's messy. It's painful. It doesn't have the neat, happy ending where everyone hugs and learns their lesson. But that's exactly why I told it. Because real life rarely wraps up clean. And the people who need to hear this, the ones sitting at their own family tables, wondering if they're crazy for feeling used, they don't need a fairy tale. They need the truth. So here's what I'm asking. If any part of this story made you feel seen, drop a comment. Tell me your moment. The time you were called selfish for setting a boundary. The family member who rewrote history to make you the villain. The sacrifice that was expected, taken, and then forgotten. You don't have to share everything. Even one sentence is enough, because every comment becomes proof that this experience is real, that we're not dramatic, that we're not alone. If this helped you, hit that subscribe button. Not for me, for the next person. The algorithm shows this to more people when you engage, and somewhere out there is someone who desperately needs to hear that walking away doesn't make you heartless. It makes you human. Share this with someone who's still stuck in the cycle. Maybe they're not ready to leave yet. That's okay. But at least they'll know there's a door and that someone else walked through it and survived. I'm still healing. I'm still learning. But I'm no longer silent. And if you've made it this far, neither are you. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being part of a community that chooses honesty over performance. I'll see you in the next one. And remember, you are not responsible for saving people who refuse to stop drowning you.